I didn't see him. I came to this time.
I'm sharing the screen on Zoom meeting.
So this is my personal room.
Okay, I'll share the info. The plug. I actually send the link, Zoom link on Slack.
Got there. You there? Right?
Yeah.
But you're muted, right?
Okay. So today's session will actually be not a lot different than the previous one we actually had. And the previous session we are doing processing sequences using RNNs. Today we'll be doing the GRUs, using GRUs and LSTMs. In the previous session, we looked into why do we need RNNs in the first place, like when we have CNNs and the usual neural networks, why do we need RNNs? And what are RNNs, the architectures, types, how forward propagation happens, how backward propagation happens, and the training code. First thing is, do we have any questions from the previous session? After reading, doing your research, do you have any questions? Okay, so this session will be a bit different. Actually, I'll show, we'll go through the training code first, and I'll tell you why we are going through the training code first. Because from the previous training code where we used RNNs to GRUs or LSTMs, actually nothing changes much. The only thing that changes is the Keras layer we are using, where in that case we'll be using a simple RNN Keras layer, but in this case we'll be using a GRU or an LSTM layer. And once we are done with the okay. GRU actually means gated recurrent units, and LSTMs are long short-term networks. We'll go through why they are called so, and how the naming comes, and architecture and everything. And I'll tell you why we actually don't change anything in the code. The first thing why I'm showing code is that the code doesn't change much, and I'll tell you why that also. And then we'll go into why we are actually going into GRUs and LSTMs, and what are the drawbacks of RNNs in the first place, and like GRUs and RNNs, the overview and architecture of GRUs and RNNs. Sorry, LSTMs. Okay. So the code, yeah, the code actually remains as same actually. If you compare the RNN classification with LSTM classification, we are doing the same on the LSTM and RNN classification on the same data set to see if there's any difference in the first place. So the only thing that changes in the whole code is only one line. When I say one line, actually only one line changes.
Don't look very big. Like a real Americans.
So the only line change actually is this line. Except this, everything remains constant. Here, if you remember, we actually used simple RNNs in the first core session, and in this core session, we'll be using LSTMs. And if you want to use GRUs, then again, the code remains constant, everything, and the only that thing that changes is we place GRUs. This is because most of the code actually we write is not building the model. The only building model code is this one, where we initiate a sequence modeling, embedding, dropout, the layer, whatever we want, again a dropout and dense. That's it.
Do we still train it the same way we train the whole class model?
Yeah, the training doesn't change. Nothing actually changes. Nothing in the sense actually nothing changes. The only thing that changes is just line. Because most of the code actually we are writing is mainly to do text processing. So when we have those tweets, taking those, taking those tweets, getting the information, whatever we want, processing that, and getting the target variables ready. This is the most work we are doing. And building model actually is a very small part of our code. Only this actually, this highlighted portion, whatever I am showing now, that is the only place where they are building model. Because this is a simple model, we actually were able to write it in single cell. But when we are experimenting, we actually write in like bit more complicated models. And the one thing that which I want to stress in this whole thing is nothing changes from RNNs to GREs and LSTMs. The way you give inputs, the way you collect outputs, nothing changes. Everything remains the same. Uh, so we'll come to the core again at last to discuss every bit of it. But now I'll go through like what
It's very simple.
But also remember that what have you learned? That there's really no perfect way to build these models, right?
Yeah.
You just have to remember what the hyperparameters are, right? And then after that, you narrow down to figure out when you're not getting the right results, like what could be wrong with your code, right? Because and this is like something maybe I've appreciated more with the boot camp. You know, it's always like, oh yeah, but it's just like you can start with the most simple model and then you're like, it doesn't make sense and just keep going, you know. So that's my perception.
I was reading this blog on Uber forecasting how they predict anomalies on New Year Eve where they have like a lot of rides. Yeah, the first model they tried actually is not even a deep learning model or machine learning. It's just statistical model. There is this model called ARIMA, auto regression. So you know like how moving window works, right? That is the first model they have tried in the first place. So even the best companies in the world actually try first the basic models and then
It's something
move.
we don't do,
Yeah.
really, but that's our approach.
Yeah, that's how we
Start
actually
with a
should.
simple model and then get your results.
Yeah.
Then you have some chance to think about the data. Oh no, obviously if you're doing like a straight like race thing and you know you can just jump to whatever we've been doing. But I think it's like a good strategy for doing it like
Yeah.
you don't
And one more important thing is when you are building those statistical models and small models, you will know what data actually you are working on and how the data is responding to this particular things. Then you will be able to scale them up. So from previous session, if a small flashback, this is an RNN. So xt1, xt plus 1, this is where our input comes. The S is the cell state. W's are where we are actually transferring the hidden states, and OT minus 1, OT plus 1 are where we are collecting the outputs.
So you see how it's flat like this. Is it possible to also stack it with
Yeah, I'll actually, yeah, I'm coming to that point now. Yeah, we'll be able to stack, but there's actually a disadvantage with stacking the sequential models. Yeah, that's a drawback of RNN we'll be discussing. So, yeah, fine. Yeah, it's actually good that the question came up first. In GRUs or LSTMs, this architecture doesn't change at all. The only thing that changes is the ST minus 1, ST and ST plus 1, the cell state is there, right? In RNNs, in simple RNNs, we don't have much in the cell state. We actually have only a simple function, either a sigmoid or a tanh function. We usually have it. And that is the only thing that exists in the cell state. So this is the information train in RNNs. And I'm just, this green block is a cell state. So when this black line, this thing is the hidden state from the previous unit, and this xt is the input we are giving at this current point of time. So what happens is when the hidden state comes, input comes, we just add them up, we do some addition, it goes to a tanh function or a sigmoid function and goes into the next output state and next hidden state, and the output is nothing, we just take output from here. On top of it, whatever we are having, that is output. So there's not much thing going on, and that actually becomes a disadvantage. I know it's a simple one to explain and to understand and to implement while coding, but it actually comes with some certain disadvantages. So the problems with RNNs are the ones we actually discussed in the previous session. One thing is a vanishing or an exploding gradient descent. So what happens is, when
You're gonna know so much about RNNs, but not use them.
yeah, actually that is one bad thing about learning. We first learn what not to use and why not to use them, and then go to why what are the things that we should use. But actually, RNNs usually we don't use them in text, but in sequences we still first try with RNNs.
Yeah, they do with the onions and all.
So if you're working on any NLP project, yeah. But yeah, because of the yeah, he does. This is doing a lot of batch training, right? But that's different. The transformers are different.
Yeah, transformers are the next level of systems. We'll go into the next section, possible. So the only thing that is going on is input comes just a simple tanh operation from the ht minus one, whatever the previous density is, and we are going on again. The one thing we actually one thing happens that when data is propagating through RNNs is, so you see this the calculation of ht minus one will be a W weight. Let's say this is WX, this is WO, and this is WH. WH of previous one, HT minus 2, comma XT minus 1, plus some constant C1, let's say. And HT will be WH, because WH will remain constant. This remains constant. WH HT minus 1, comma X of t plus C of t. And you see this H of t actually comes here. So it will be, when you actually do this, it will be H square for going with two nodes of RNNs. Provided that we have a big RNN, like let's say 20 sequences of RNNs. So you see this WH actually will be WH power n, whereas n will be not a large number, but substantially greater than 5 or 6 at least, let's say. And if you remember, the weights actually usually are passing through a sigmoid or tangent function, which actually pushes them to -1 or 1, -1 to 1 or 0 to 1. So if you have a weight of 0.01 or 0.3 even for, let's say, when you multiply it, when you go on for an exponent, what happens is it becomes 0.09. And in the next iteration, it becomes 0.09 into 0.3. It becomes 0.027. So you see this, the weight actually reduces. We are not doing anything. We are not actually intending it to reduce, but because of the calculation, the weight reduces substantially. If the weight W of H is actually not less, and if it is like 2, let's say, a small number even, it explodes. You see, when you go for a power of 3, it becomes 8. And when you go on, when you move in the sequence, it actually explodes, or it actually vanishes completely. And when the weight vanishes, you're not learning much thing, because the only thing is not in any network you are learning is weights, right? And if the weights are not changing much, then you are not learning anything in the network. So training this kind of networks actually it takes a lot of time because of this thing. To overcome this thing, it takes a lot of time for the network to move. And then we are discussing only in one propagation. Let's suppose it goes and comes back for a backward propagation. Coming back actually is even worse if you think about it. Because here we are actually directly going for powers. But when coming in backward propagation, we'll do those like differential of these things, which actually reduces their significance even lower. So it actually becomes a headache for learning these things. So in long sequences, the gradients, when I say gradients of weights, they get multiplied by the weight matrices at every step. And if the values are small, the gradients get smaller and smaller. On the other hand, if the values are large and the nonlinearity, if it doesn't adjust them perfectly, they'll explode simply. So this is a huge problem here. And the fix for this problem is clipping gradients. So what happens is, we actually give a range of weights. Let's say the weight actually is 0.3. Then we say that, okay, the initial weight is 0.3. If it drops below 0.01, or if it goes above
What is it about?
Yeah, actually, Keras actually handles this. We don't actually give any of these weights. Keras indifferently handles this. Uh, let's say if it goes below 0.01 or if it goes above 5, I'm not going to consider it at all. I'll if it goes below 0.01, I'll just take 0.01. That's it. And if it goes above 5, I'll take 5. Nothing more than that. So we actually click the gradients at the lower end and upper bound and say that this is the range I'll go. Which actually will be a bit problem if you think about it, because the only thing that neural networks does very good is learning weights, and we are not allowing them to freely do that. We are saying we are actually putting restrictions on top of it.
So
So
you need to do like the early stopping, have the gradients clipping,
no, order stopping is actually a different thing.
because you're looking at the like the output
Yeah.
values versus the validation.
Yeah, actually-
so this is not. So this is not even touched like even the end of
No.
the pass.
No,
right?
not at all. So early stopping happens when we do early stopping because let's say we are running it for 100 epochs, a network for 100 epochs, and if the model actually is learning till like 45 or 46 epochs, and then it becomes saturated from 46 to 50 or 55, the changes will be negligible. The weights doesn't change much. The recall and the metrics, whatever we are calculating, it doesn't change much. So in the early stopping, whatever Judy is talking about, in Keras, we actually have this thing. We'll give a metric. We'll say, okay, training loss is a metric, and if it doesn't change for n epochs, like for 5 epochs, it doesn't change much, then I'm stopping it. That is what early stopping is. But this is not early stopping or anything. This is just changing weights. This is in the first stages of model learning. So this is actually a small issue, and this is how we fix it. And other problem with RNNs are memorization. So we actually discussed this thing when Chima pointed out about Markov chain models and RNNs. The main thing, whatever we argued that RNNs are better, is they actually are able to memorize information that which has been given in the past. Because if you see at HT, we're actually having information from HT minus 1 embedded in it. So at this point of time, I am able to memorize what happens in the previous two steps, or uh, theoretically in previous n steps also, if you go by this formula. But in practice, what happens is the main disadvantage of RNNs is the ability to remember that, which we have discussed in the past. But in practice, what happens is they doesn't remember much. So why this happens is the same problem again. Let's say HT actually is having HT minus 1. So HT pays more attention, or it gives more importance to the weights at HT minus 1. And but in practice, it fails to memorize important pieces of information that appeared long time ago. So it actually doesn't have something uh, a place where it says this piece of information is important or this piece of information is not important. So it doesn't actually have any this kind of. So it actually memorizes the previous instances better. And even if there is some very important thing which happened like 10 steps back, it forgets it completely. So that's one disadvantage with RNNs. So when we are actually doing RNNs in practice, if you are going above 15 or 20, yeah, RNNs are mostly useless. And the problem which I'm actually coming is like Shima actually pointed this out. RNNs cannot be stacked up easily. So if you remember the usual networks, what happens is, let's say we have inputs here and we actually have some hidden states. Yeah, and we come up to actually a classification or regression point. Here we actually get outputs. In some cases, if you remember, for transfer learning, we flip these things and we just take this vector and build it on top of this vector. This actually happens in a lot of cases. In image captioning, we take an image and we train it on a classifier or something, or segmentation or something of that sort. And we don't do segmentation. Let's suppose this is a segmentation layer. We don't do segmentation. We just stop it here and give it to an RNN, so that from this vector we actually get text then captioning. So this is how we actually work on. But for RNN that is not possible because This is the simple RNN, right? So let's say we are actually stacking up an RNN on top of this. So yeah, let's say this is the one and we are stacking up on top of this. So this output of this RNN will be the input for the next RNN. But from the previous slide, whatever we discussed, because of vanishing and exploding gradients, sorry, the training becomes complicated even for one layer. And imagine we are actually stacking one more layer on top of this. So this, I was reading this yesterday. The author gives a very blunt opinion on about this. He says that we actually do a lot of training, and the competition becomes very expensive. And at the end, we don't get the result that which we are looking for. Like provided in this RNN, we are actually having like it's taking 5 minutes, and we are getting some 60% accuracy. After stacking up, it takes like 20 or 25 minutes, and it doesn't move much. It comes at 64 or 65. That's it. So that's the competition becomes expensive with those that can never be justified with any accuracy gain, any metric gain. It doesn't happen much. So that's one more problem with stacking up RNNs. And one more thing is it is difficult to process longer sequences, especially when TANH and ReLU activation functions, because ReLU activation function actually has this thing, and TANH has this thing. So as this goes up, this actually becomes saturated, so the weight doesn't move much. In this case, if it is 0, it completely becomes utterly useless. So we are not doing anything. We are not, if the weight is 0, then the change we are making in the back propagation will also be 0. So in that whole pass, we are not changing any weight. Yeah, that becomes useless because in LSTMs and RNNs, WH actually remains constant throughout the network. So for these kind of applications, when we are processing long sequences, it becomes utterly useless. Yeah.
And I said that, no. He said it becomes like useless. Bruh.
Is it good?
Oh, no. This is good. I wasn't talking about this. I was talking about
okay.
It doesn't look that good.
Okay. So to mitigate the lapses we have in RNNs and simple RNNs, we come to GRUs and LSTMs. So the only thing that GRUs and LSTMs do differently is the way they handle this cell. So in RNNs we discussed that.
it is back.
Yeah, no. So let's go here. The only thing that change is this cell. This cell actually in RNNs is a simple TANH function, like the information train, whatever we saw. GRUs and LSTMs handle them in a bit different way, and they employ an internal mechanism called gates to regulate the flow of information. So they just don't take the information at this instance coming. So they actually maintain a cell state which actually carries the information from the previous, and we actually maintain gates like forget gate. It trains in such a way that to tell the network whether we have to forget this information or remember this information. And these gates can learn data in sequence, which is important to store them or throw the rest, thus passing on only the relevant information in the down pass to make predictions. And this actually becomes hugely advantageous when we are dealing with time series of long sequences, like long text, speech, and time series information. Yeah, GRUs and LSTMs are used in all of these wherever we can find sequences. The next big question is how they are doing it. So we are saying that only they are changing this gate thing, and how they are actually changing the gates, and how those changes are actually improving whatever we have drawbacks from RNNs. This is an internal structure of an LSTM. So this green thing, whatever we are seeing, it's the cell state. The cell state in RNNs, this is the cell state. And I'll actually, this is not usually, I don't actually show it here, I actually draw this here, and I'll explain this, the weights and distance here, but just to show, the red things are sigmoids, blue are TANH functions, and point-wise multiplication is just nothing but a dot product of multiplication. and adding is matrix addition. And whenever you see a two layers merge, two arrows merge, it's just vector concatenation, simple concatenations. Those are the operations. And this is why actually I asked in book club Slack meeting to read about sigmoid and tanh functions. The main, I know sigma and tanh functions are looks like very simple mathematical functions, and they are actually simple mathematical functions, but in this setting they actually control the whole thing, and we'll discuss on how that actually happens. So LSTM actually has 4 gates called cell state, input, forget, and output. Just remember these names and don't ask me like what are the cell states here. I'll show that now, because you can see like we have 5 functions and a lot of point-wise multiplication, a lot of additions and things. So coming to this LSTM, are you able to actually see this perfectly? Because this could be good. You should concentrate. If you So you remember like in LSTMs we have like an information train where we are getting input and the hidden state. The same thing happens here. We get an input and a previous hidden state. So the input actually here would be like xt or xt minus 1 something, ht minus 1, ht minus 2 something, whatever. This is where the things comes. One thing that is different is there is a CT minus 1 in LSTMs. This CT minus 1 here, the top layer, actually this thing, whole thing, this line actually is called cell state. The first layer here, the first gate, whatever I was talking about cell state, this thing is cell state. So this cell state actually is an information highway. This is the one that which carries the information all along the LSTM. And because you can see whatever the hidden state inputs are coming, whatever the operations are happening here, they actually push up to this cell state, and this cell state propagates. This is the first one thing, cell state, and the important thing that cell state is doing is propagating information. Remember that the cell state propagates information, and how what information propagates will come. And the next thing is, actually I wrote here input gate, but the thing what we have to look at is forget gate. Remember in LSTMs we said that it doesn't know what information is important and not important. It doesn't actually consider any of those things. This forget gate actually answers that drawback. So what it does is it actually uses a simple sigmoid function. And exact. So what does a sigmoid function do? Yeah, simple. It takes an input and it converts it into a 0 or 1. So what it does is, when it is 1, remember, when it is 0, forget. So it will be a probability of whether the information is to be remembered. No, you cannot actually use a ReLU. I'll tell you why. But suppose this is a sigmoid function. Sorry. This is 0.5, this is top is 1, and this is 0. For ReLU, this is the thing that's happening. You see, for sigmoid, we are having a range from 0 and 1, which says like if 0, I'll forget. If 1, I'll remember this information. That cell state, like, let's take a sentence like I'm studying in France and I am about to learn French. Let's say we are at the word France. So what happens is when the word France comes into the input here, this forget gates, what it does is it actually makes a judgment call saying that whether the word France or the information from France is to be remembered or not. With 0 means forget completely, 1 means remember. But ReLU starts from 0, it's fine, but it doesn't have an upper boundary for us. So if you are using a ReLU function, you have to again normalize it. Yeah, we have to again normalize it. So we are actually having more calculations and not much of an information is coming again. So we actually use a sigmoid for this thing. So that's why actually I asked you to read sigma and tanh.
You know who did not read sigma and tanh?
When I came, I actually asked him.
Oh,
what is the difference? You know the answer. So the difference between tanh and sigmoid is both actually looks the same. The only difference is tanh ranges from -1 to 1 with a 0 as midpoint. Whereas sigma 1 has 0.5 as midpoint and goes from 0 to 1. Yeah. Yeah, so we are at forget gate. Yeah, sorry. So this is how a forget gate works. When an information comes input and heading state, it takes these two inputs and makes a judgment call whether it has to forget or not. So the forget gate f of t will be a weight. Let's say this weight is wf here. This is the input coming. This input will have input state x of t and previous state h of t minus 1. So these two are coming as inputs here. And when these two pass, let's say the weight is w of f because it is forget gate. So f of w of f of h of t minus 1 comma x of t plus some constant, let's say b of f because it's forget gate again. So w of f is a forget gate weight, h of t minus 1 is the previous hidden state, x of t is an input, b of f is a constant. This is what the forget gate does. And you see the forget gate actually, whatever it is forgetting or remembering, it is pushing the information to a cell state again. So it's say when in the cell state the information is passing through, it says, okay, I know that you have this information from the previous, and now got some new information, and this is the thing that you have to remember going forward, and this is the information that you have to forget. So the CT of it actually this f of t regulates the CT of the cell state, saying what it should remember and what it should not remember, and it actually gives nothing just but a weight. It just says 0.3 or 0.01. It says the probability of this thing to be remembered or not. That's it.
So how does it learn that? Is it because you're telling it what to remember or it just guesses?
No, it doesn't just get it. So when we are actually training a lot of sentences in LSTM, let's say we are in the training stage, we actually gave. So LSTMs are actually training not for classification or regression. Actually, the usual text is trained in such a way that we actually give a sentence and we pluck out some blocks of words in a sentence, and we say predict that word, and we'll ask actually to predict that word. So what happens is, while predicting that word, to predict that word, it actually takes context from back, so from the previous state, so previous word, right? So let's say we actually gave this word, this sentence, like I am in France and I'm learning French. We pluck out the word French. Let's say we pluck out the word French. So at first I am studying some, let's say, computer science. That is the prediction we gave. Then we say no. Computer science is the one you predict. French is the real one. French is the real one. So it actually calculates the difference and actually tries to regulate the weight. So while regulating the weight, it actually sees that there's an information in the back end, in the previous states called France, that which actually has more weight to this word French.
That's a funny question. So you said we use LSTMs and
GRUs.
GRUs for non-classification. We use the simple RNN for classification.
Oh, no. We actually use both of them for classification. So, I mean, the tasks, whatever we are doing, whether we consider BERT, LSTMs, RNNs, we actually do regression tasks, we actually do classification tasks, questioning answering, we'll do these tasks. I'm not talking about R training. I'm talking about you actually, when you are using a BERT model, you actually get pre-trained weights from the BERT model. I'm talking about how those weights are actually trained. I'm actually talking about how these networks are able to learn language. Whatever the classification, regression, whatever we are doing, we are assuming that it actually knows that language, and we are actually fine tuning it simply. Yeah. What I'm talking about is like how it actually understands language in the first place. It's a bit hard for me.
I know it's hard to teach this guy. So
No, it's actually.
I'm just trying to give you some support. Because he didn't read.
Huh?
Because he didn't read. I'm just giving you.
Yeah, it's fine. I know this is a simple piece of information, but it actually carries a lot of weight. Yeah, that's how actually the LSTM actually learns how to forget or what not to forget. There are a lot of these things. I explain these things also now. So this actually gives only a probability. The sigma actually gives only a probability, right? 0 to 1. That's it. And but we are giving a probability, but we are not giving the information itself, right? So input gate, what it does is it gives that information. So from one hand we are saying give the information, and the other hand we are saying what part of this information we are giving should be remembered, and yeah, what part of that information should be progressed in the next stage. And this input state works, the same inputs are coming again, because you see this whole line, nothing actually changes. The things input are coming are input and previous mentions. X of t and h of t are the inputs for every state almost. So whatever the input, what happens is when these two comes here, it actually doesn't do anything. It does a simple sigmoid function here. This is the important thing. The tan H function, what it does is when we have inputs and previous states coming, let's say it's a vector which is ranging from let's say from 50 to minus 50. What it does is to not have the ones which we discussed, the drawback of gradient explosion or gradient descent, where we have more weights, they actually explode. Where we have less weights, it actually goes exponentially down and down. What it does is tan H actually squishes everything between -1 and 1 simply. So it says whatever you have weights, I don't care about it. I'll actually normalize everything. The yeah, you asked me like are radio and why do you use this thing? Because this thing, because these two actually have lower and upper bounds, so that we can control the weights. Because if you are using ReLU, let's say this can go on and go on, right? The weight can go on here. Let's say here we have some 50, and if that is being propagated in weight, it explodes. So that is why we are actually using sigmoid and tan H functions. So this tan H function actually say just does the only thing it does is it normalizes the input and previous one states. Yeah, see, tan H will take WC. Let's say this is substrate, this is going into substrate. So let's call it WC, the weight. H of t minus 1, previous hidden state, and x of t. Input with some constant. It actually squishes everything between 0 and 1 simply. And the input gate, what this input gate does is the same thing, whatever we are doing here, it does it, and it clubs those two things. It says, okay, this is the information that's coming in, and this is the part of information you should remember. It clubs this and gives to this cell state. And here we are actually just whatever we are having, we multiply this thing. Because let's say here we have this actually will be a matrix, and this will be again just one integer which will usually be between 0 and 1 because of its sigmoid. So we multiply this whole matrix with a number and just give it to the cell state to propagate it. That's it. So the input actually gives what input it is going, and forget gate does what it does. What part of this input is to be remembered, and what part of this input, if the input is not to be remembered, it just gives 0. Okay, whatever is coming in is garbage, forget it. It says. And the final thing, output, why do we need output layer is, we need to next pass what is the next hidden state, right? So the same thing again happens. You see a sigmoid, whenever a sigmoid happens, it does only one thing. It says, what part of information do I need to hold? That is the only question it answers. So then again, input, previous state, these two come. They go to sigmoid, they actually learn, let's say some X part of the information is to be learned, and then they go into a hidden state. The hidden state actually will get inputs from this thing also. This actually is this. So the information flows like this, and the cell state, whatever. Yeah, this has been tracking all the information. So provided that we don't have this, remember that we don't have this. So we'll actually, this hidden state will only have the inputs from this state and the previous hidden state, which actually it tends to forget from RNNs. So to mitigate that forgetting, the memorization problem, we're actually giving the whole thing. This actually CDA actually has the whole information. This is the information highway. Remember, this actually has all the information. This information we are giving it here, and we are giving this information also again. So it actually has the information from previous things and this input, and this comes to as the next hidden state. So this is one LSTM string. We actually attach one circle. Yeah, this is one circle. Yeah. So you remember this circle. This whole thing is just one circle. That's it. Yeah, and we attach these kind of circles again and again. So the information propagates in this manner. And the only thing that which we are changing from RNNs and LSTMs, remember, is the way it stores information. That's it. That is the reason I actually came to code first place. Nothing in the code changed. The only thing that changes is LSTM or RNN. The only discipline is changing. The inputs are not changing, the outputs are not changing, the weights are not changing. The way they propagate are not changing. The only thing that propagates is the only thing that changes is how the weights are being calculated. That is the only thing that is changing. So yeah, it's, actually, when I was reading about this LSTMs, the first like 4 years back or something, when I was reading about LSTMs, yeah. When I was first reading about LSTMs, because now we know like how the information is for being proper. We know that how forget gate works and how input gate works and how output gate works. But remember, this has been created by us, like one person, right? Remember how he actually came up with this thing. So he actually has to put gates and see how these work and how they actually practically work. That thing actually you can find it here. And we actually think LSTM actually is like a very new network, but LSTM actually came in 1997. And yeah, these two are the people who actually introduced this thing. And if you are trying to spell those names, yeah, I'll pray for your souls. Yeah, two German dudes. That's it. That's the only thing you should remember. So this actually is a pretty old information, but because of the advent of data and the computation power, it became very useful for us now. But read this paper; it actually gives you a lot of. It actually makes you think a lot about, yeah, how. So yeah, think about the perspective of the scientist who actually has to come up with this architecture. So first he has to learn how actually the information is being forgotten or the information is being stored. First that we have to get it. So we have to look for all the activations that can do it for us and plug in each activation at every point. So that is how input gate is born. And then you need to have some other intuition for the forget gate, some other intuition for how the next hidden state, the information that is should be passed into the hidden state. This is actually a mind-opening paper. So we actually write just in Keras. This is the one thing I don't like about Keras. I mean, the one thing that actually Keras is, yeah, high level, very high level. This whole thing, the one thing, everything we discussed, it doesn't actually given. You don't even need to know it to implement Keras. Keras LSTMs, we don't even need that. How do I switch tabs? Yeah, the only thing you need to do is layers.lstm. That's it. Imagine how these two guys feel now. Like, we have done this much work, and these guys are just learning LSTM and just using everything. These guys don't even understand what's going inside this.
Yeah, this is where we're trying to get, and
Yeah. So one thing we have to. So I one thing I learned about while learning ML, the one thing I learned is you need to know how to write code, right? sklearn.linear regression. It does the linear regression. But you need to know how linear regression works, because if linear regression does not work, you need to understand why it does not work and what model will work for this data better. You need to know these two things, so that's why you need to know the internal math behind every model. You don't need to remember this. I wouldn't ask you to remember this. Even before coming to this session in library, I was preparing this thing. I know this, like 4 years back I read this, I have it in the back of my mind. Whenever LSTM is not working, I just go to this website. The website where I actually learned this thing is this one, the final website, Understanding LSTMs, which I read like in 2018 or so. I'll go to this and I'll see the cell states and I'll look, okay, this is where the LSTM is not able to learn. I get it. So next I'll propagate to the network that which it will work better. So that is the internal gate mechanisms of LSTMs and how they learn and how they forget and how they propagate the information. So these are the four cells, right? So this small thing is a forget one. So yeah,
input, output.
yeah, this information highway is a cell state. This thing is a forget gate. These two are the input ones because we're getting the inputs, squishing them and giving it to the cell state. And this is the output gate. So these are the four gate mechanisms that which operate the single LSTM cell.
I think for people watching, it'll help if you highlight it on your. Highlight
I
this
think
for-
what we'll do is take a picture of this, and then yeah, because it's like an amazing explanation. You know, you can record like something
Yeah.
short, with just like
Yeah.
something short, and we can add it on. But this is like amazing. But I think it can be a very good teacher.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
believe me, I know. No, I tried actually, it did not work out well.
No, seriously. You did guys agree? Yeah.
So this is how an LSTM works. Remember that we have another thing called GRUs. So actually GRU, I explained LSTMs first because we mostly use LSTMs. And GRUs are the first things that has to come up. Before LSTMs, GRUs came, and from GRUs we actually came up to LSTMs again. So I explained LSTMs first because I wanted to give all the information in the first place. And GRUs actually are not this complicated. We can actually explain them. I can actually explain them on this slide. These actually GRUs actually have only two gates: update and reset. That's it. So what it does is reset is again the forget gate. It does actually this forget gate like decides how much information is to be forgotten, and update gate is like the input gate on how much information is to be thrown away or added to the cell state. Those are the two things that which GRUs have, and from GRUs we developed LSTMs. GRUs came in 1994. So RNN's problems. This problem was actually this problem was widely open and discussed regarding this problem discussed in 1991. First time that is a paper came out which discussed RNN drawbacks. 1994 is when GRUs came out. 97 is when LSTMs came out. And LSTMs actually ruled the language processing or sequences for next 20 years, for until 2017 or so. And in 2017, because of the data, whatever we are getting, I mean, like then whatever we are doing is just writing postcards. That is where we are using automation actually. And if you remember the Yann LeCun actually got the CNNs, this thing. Remember the MNIST digit recognition? The main application for MNIST, you know why MNIST was invented? To read the zip codes like 46202, 30318, to read those zip codes from the envelope. That is the main thing. And that is where the CNNs were developed actually. That is why CNNs were developed. But then we actually came up with a lot of applications for those. And LSTMs are actually, when LSTMs came, the data, language data, whatever we are working is small. But now we're actually giving LSTMs documents. And LSTMs, you have to understand their problem also because they are doing a shit amount of calculation for one cell. Poor things. And we are asking you to do it like for, in this case, I'm asking you to do it for 32 cells. And some other idiot gives 128 cells. And schema comes and he stacks up again. So you see, again, computation actually goes a lot of complex calculations has to go, which slows down the architecture. So LSTMs are actually ruled until we do not give them a lot of information. And once we start giving a lot of information, even these things do have pitfalls because of the information travels, how the information travels in sequence layer. So that is when the paper called Attention is All You Need to Know. In 2017 December, there is a paper called Attention is All You Need, which discusses about a different language processing thing called attention, which we will discuss in the next coming sessions. Huh? No. For sequence processing, this is the one, and I will allow the next person, whoever is working on the next chapter, to give. And when attentions came up, I'll take up the one.
Now
Yeah.
you're making me first go back to what's the next chapter? Is that the attention?
No, not attentions.
Oh, when we were going to ask Jason to present to us, huh? Did you ask him?
What? I haven't. We should find it.
Actually, prepared the slide for board also.
Oh, wow.
Attention.
So
And
I
made.
personally, oh, you see what you did there? That's what you should do for this. Include them in the slide.
Okay.
But I personally actually want to hear back a lot Like I don't want you to
Actually,
rush
we
through it.
don't want to go bird first.
Yeah. So
We actually first have to go through attentions, how attentions work, and this is how attentions work. They take a sequence. So attention, the name itself says, how much attention are you paying to each word? That is what it actually takes. That's it. And we calculate how it goes. Bird actually doesn't come into picture until 2018 or so. Actually, bird is not a complete representation.
don't keep
Complete.
this letter. You're gonna keep it.
No, no, no. On overview, just I'll explain what bird name actually is. Bidirectional encoder representation for transformers. Attention actually has two things: transformers, encoders and decoders. Two things. Transformer. Bird actually takes only encoders and it stacks up. That's it. It removes the decoder, it takes the encoder and it stacks up the encoder 12 times for a base, 24 times a large base, that's all. But there's a lot of things before bird we have to understand attentions. That we'll go through the next in the next sessions. So as of now, this is the slide for today. Book club
Can
GR.
we see the book, the chapter? You have it open?
Can you open actually? Because I'm opening it in incognito. And one thing I'd suggest to do is take a look at these references.
Yeah.
These are like top class references.
It's true. I saw that opening last time, right?
Now, if you want to read papers, the best way I found to do it is to do three things: summarize, strength, and weakness.
Yeah.
That's what we said with my
So this actually this blog whatever I'm showing now on screen, it actually it's written in 2015. This is where I actually learned like how one cell of an LSTM works and how each cell actually carries the information and propagates the information. And he will explain very really nice. He'll come from what RNNs are and what are the drawbacks of the long-term dependency in RNNs and where LSTM comes into picture and how these LSTM cells are there and the idea behind these things.
Okay, any questions for that? I know we kept asking as you went, especially
Uh,
for people
and-
who did not read.
Oh my God.
Oh, this is actually not needed. This is read this paper if possible. And after reading this paper, I'm pretty sure you will need to take 20 minutes break. I suggest to take 20 minutes break to
Can't finish.
think about. Yes. Think about the long shot term memories. Actually, the first time I learned, it kind of felt like time travel. Because at this point of time, we are learning the information that which has been shown